come to ask you how you're doing these days. Didn't come to roll no stones away, no. I come to tell you that the end is nigh. I come to prophesy, yeah.
Intro, honestly, and after that, I'll chill out and stop twitching.
Very cool, very cool. I think twitching is part of the podcast process. I think that's why
You want
so
a
few of them go to
messenger,
the end,
Yeah, they are kind of worse. Or it just feels like you're watching reality TV. Not very good reality TV, but okay. And we're off. Welcome back to Talk Fiction, the podcast dedicated to entertainment media's most overlooked underdogs, fiction writers. I'm your host, Meg Olders, author of the Waddy Award-winning novel C. Smile and creator of the dynamic newsletter anthology Stock Fiction. My guest today is Denard Dale. Denard is a New York-based super predator specializing in writing, comedy, and illegal pranks, his words. He's the author of Everything Abridged, a satire collection available for immediate purchase wherever you buy books, and his next book, How to Dodge a Cannonball, is slated for publication next summer. 2025, in case people are listening to this a year from now. In the meantime, you can try to keep up with Denard on his newsletter, Extra Evil, or his column on 1-900 Hot Dog, or find him spicing up the archives at The New Yorker, McSweeney's, Clark's World, and beyond. He has one of those MFAs everyone's talking about, and he runs a successful side hustle molding the next generation of creative minds at Columbia University. I will drop links to Denard's book and supporting documents in the show notes, but without further ado, allow me to introduce my distinguished guest, Denard Dale.
That was a much better introduction than I give myself. That was very good.
Yay. Everybody kind of says something along those lines, like, can I borrow that, or can I have that, or steal that from my website? And by all means, I'll send you a copy. So welcome, and thank you for being here. I'm very excited to chat with you.
Glad to be here.
We've never actually chatted outside of the comment section of our respective Substacks. Always fun to put faces with voices and typeface.
Oh yeah, it must be really weird to hear my voice.
I've heard it though, because I actually watched your documentary on your YouTube channel, because I was internet stalking you for a couple days, which is usually what I do before I talk to people. So I feel I feel properly informed.
That is excellent. That was a good time. That was a good time. I remember actually sort of standing by the trains while you're trying to get the shots. Like, there were those odd shots of like the train pulling in and out, which it turns out was not stock. You just stand there and do that.
Yeah, it was excellent. It was really well done, and a great length, I thought, too. What was it, like 6 minutes or something? It was ideal.
Yeah, 6 minutes. Shout out to Leo Gallagher, the director and editor of that whole business.
And I will absolutely put a link or even just embed it right in the post when I put this out, because it's worth a watch. So I always start with just kind of how I found my guest on Substack. And this might be the same for you, how you came across my Substack, which is that you were just essentially gift wrapped for me by Amron Gowani, who was my guest on episode 4. He had read something of mine. It was actually, I put it out as a horror story, but he told me it was satire, and then immediately told me I needed to be reading yours. So that's how I came to find Extra Evil, and I've been reading you ever since. And I have to applaud you for the efficiency of your newsletter. And I don't mean that it seems like it's fast. It just, part of the reason I'm excited to talk to you is I'm always trying to find like a theme for these episodes so that by the end I can be like, okay, guys, this is what we talked about. And what you illustrate to me is that there is so much work that goes into this, the writer life. Anyone who thinks they really want to do it, it's just constant work. And when you're posting in your newsletter, you're always kind of shouting out the 9 or 10 other things you're doing while you're writing your newsletter. And so it's really impressive to me that you are able to balance all of it. So I don't know if at any point you'll have advice for how to do that, or you just need to, I think you've admitted, not sleep. It's part of how you get around that. But I think we'll talk a little bit more about that, because I ultimately I feel like my listeners, or I just have decided that my listeners are some version of me, in that they're trying to do this, but they have their weaknesses and their strengths, and they're looking at other people and how other people are quote unquote succeeding and trying to put themselves in other people's shoes. And I really like seeing different versions of what success looks like or what the writer life looks like. So that's why it's just fun for me to have different people on here who are in different stages of the whole thing.
All right, I'll try to live up to that. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure you will. And if you don't, I will do it for you because I I have so many notes here. If you have listened to the other shows, you know that like I do this little celebrations and frustrations thing. And that's really just kind of like an equalizer because no matter what, everybody has something that they're celebrating and something that's really grinding their gears. I usually let my guest go first. So if you have those handy, I'd love to hear, what's going great for you right now and what's pissing you off.
So, celebration wise, I think normally a lot of the short term stuff I do, like the column, newsletter, etc., is very there's very much a running against the clock kind of feeling. And for the first time in a while, I know what I'm doing for like 4 weeks in a row.
Nice.
Yeah, which is it feels very sane making, and I am happy about that. On a far headier note, I have just made some progress in some sideline hobby stuff. Like I actually have a little bit of time to do some gaming again, which is again good for my head. I think that a lot of, I mean, we talk about the right life. I think like finding the balance that lets you not go mad is a big part of the whole thing, and that is something that's going well. And sort of tending my personal garden, I'm spending a little more time trying to learn stupid human tricks again. I like a lot of the sort of, I don't know, physical skateboardy lifty stuff, and I have been able to dedicate some time to that. Let's see, in terms of frustration, other than, various meta news narratives that strike a lot of people lately, it has actually been a decent 2 months. I think I may be losing my grip on my email. Like it may just be becoming its own force, and hopefully I can reverse that trend. But that has been difficult. I have a interesting thing where I can only describe it as a neighbor having a screaming argument with their dog every morning, and it's
Oh,
good to be able to set my circadian rhythm, but it is a little abrasive. Well, and celebrating, I recently found out through a notification email from Substack that I guess there are 1,000 people subscribed now, which is very cool. Thank you very much to my 999th through 1,000th and first follower, and obviously all the others as well, but especially those three. Those three are special. We'll call it. They have like the NBA courtside seats to my weekly oversharing.
sure. Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that was an exciting thing to hear about the 1,000. I certainly like to hear, that people I'm supporting are making the numbers happen. So congrats to you on that and on being in control of not your email, but everything else, everything else on your plate. Email's the worst. And I find that the more things I express an interest in, the more you just get buried in all of their stuff. Like how easily you get put
Yeah.
on these lists. And then you're like, well, should I stay on this list? And then you get bummed out when all your email is stuff from these lists. You're like, are there any people in here that want to talk to me? I'm always a little bummed out when I go in there and I have 10 new emails and not one of them is an actual person.
Yeah, I think one of the darker turns in modern history was when your credit card started kicking your email to various locations. Or I
Right?
don't know, maybe this is just a Bank of America hell thing and I should have jumped ship a long time ago, but I think every time I go to a new, I don't know, coffee shop in the middle of nowhere, I will suddenly get a 13 email sequence saying, "Hello, new best friend. Thank you for joining our family. And here at Family Roastery, we want you to be with us forever."
So Bank of America is just handing out your contact info then every time you buy a cup of coffee.
I guess so. Or maybe or maybe having a moment of technological literacy and I just signed up for something when I wasn't paying
No,
attention. But
I'm convinced that all you have to do is be standing next to a business with your phone, and then your phone has decided you want everything to do with that business. And so they'll send you all the stuff. So let's get into my frustration, which has to do with phones, because I just got a new phone, not because I needed a new phone, but because I needed a new data plan because I was being naughty and using up we had like a limited data plan. Like who still has that? Nobody, but we were paying like next to nothing for it. But, I kept having to scold myself for going over. So we switched plans, which,
uh
they always tempt you like, well, if you're switching plans, would you like a new phone? So I got a new phone, and it hasn't been that long since I bought a new phone, but why is it that every time it's like you feel like you've never owned a phone before when you're trying to set it up? They make it so difficult. This is the robot part. So I'm a Android user, so I have a Google loaded phone. Everything's Google on it. And so they have their little Google assistant, who on my other phone I had shut off completely, because as soon as anything
Good
starts
move.
talking to me, I'm like, all right, go into settings and get rid of this disembodied voice. I just don't want it in my life. So the way they had it preset was when you hold the power button down, which is usually when you get the option to turn your phone off or restart it or whatever. Instead of that menu popping up, the Google Assistant would pop up when you hold down the power button. But the instructions were restart your phone. So I'm sitting there with my husband and we're like routinely pushing the button down, trying to restart the phone. And it's just like, oh, how can I help you? I'm like, you can restart my damn phone. And, and she wouldn't do it. And so then I was getting really mad. Well, the first thing I said was Jesus Christ. And then it looked up a bunch of stuff about Jesus Christ for me.
You know, the metrics guy on the other end is like, wow, she is really loving this feature. She just keeps using it.
She keeps pressing the button and talking to the robot. And then at one point I said, how do I uninstall you? And then she's like, to uninstall me, you'll have to go into blah, blah, blah. And then there's a button for blah, blah, blah. And I pushed it and it wouldn't do anything. I'm still infuriated, if you can't tell. It hasn't even been 24 hours. It took me way too long to set up my phone. I finally ended up in some weird menu in the settings where the default for pushing down the power button was Google Assistant. And then if you wanted to, you could switch it to power. I'm like, yes, please. Like, who would want the Google Assistant to show up every time they tried to turn their phone
Yeah,
off?
I would like the power button to be associated with power. I would say that's a top 5
Right,
thing for me
exactly.
for the power button.
And then the next thing you have to do is, and apparently the term for this is bloatware, which is like the weird stuff they install on your phone for you that you don't want, which is all the
Yep.
stupid games. Like, so I sat there for like 20 minutes individually uninstalling all these idiotic apps that I didn't want. I'm like, this should be easier. It should be like riding a bike when you get a new phone, not like riding a freaking one pedaled unicycle, which is what it felt like. So that was my frustration.
Yeah. Nice.
Deep breaths.
In
Okay.
through the nose,
Yeah,
out through the mouth.
exactly. Thank you. Thank you. So celebrations, my celebration has everything to do with kind of breaking out of a very lengthy fit of writer's block with my fiction, because it wasn't there and I finally went back and looked at when was the last time I wrote like a new piece of fiction that wasn't, borrowing from my archives or pulling from something I'd already written. And it had been like 3 months. And I was like, whoa, that's too long for what used to be. I used to write weekly fiction, like when I started. And so that was stressing me out a little bit. And I had to unplug for a while, which is hard to do, but it really did help. And so I finally wrote some fiction, like a good chunk of it. And I'm going to post it this week, even though I don't feel like it's 1,000% where it needs to be. I feel like I just need to start pushing the button again and just getting stuff out there. But I am very excited that I sat down and words actually came out on a page.
Yeah, congratulations on getting out of the sand trap. And I honestly really agree about, like, with every piece, I think there's a point where it's just more productive to pull the trigger than exist in perpetual remake torpor. Because I mean, there's a point where even like the remake isn't necessarily better, it's just a different thing. It's like, okay, well, I probably could have just put out the
Right, exactly. My
the
only
prequel
concern
notice.
with this piece that I wrote is that it's longer. I mean, I've always been really good. Just what if I write a story, it like clocks out between 900 and like 1,600 words. But this one's like 2,500, which so when you stick it in the post, it's like 13-minute read time. I'm like, I'm going to lose half of my people right off the bat, because people see anything above 10 minutes and they're like, nope, including me,
You know,
by the way. I'm the same way.
I think people do appreciate a good change up though, like from something they sort of spend a lot of time with. Like I think those little breaks in like format or length or what have you really. I remember I was really concerned with It's been too long since I've done one of these. I have an idea for one cooked up. I just have to do this whole script thing first. And I promised myself I would finish it first. But when I started the whole expensive, evil nonfiction thing, which is just a
Yeah.
completely different format than the rest, I was sort of originally thinking like, who is going to click through to this? Like people normally like go like newsreel about my day, but I think that some people really do appreciate sort of flipping the table every now and then, which makes sense. Like part of this stuff is like A, intellectual engagement, or B, entertainment, or whatever combination of the two. And I think
Right.
that just variation like that, like I think there's room to take the odd 25,000 word break.
Right, exactly. All right, awesome. So I always find that the celebrations and frustrations takes up a fairly huge chunk of time, but I like doing it anyway. I think it's just a fun way to break the ice. Not that there was ice. I feel like we're doing fine. So let's talk about your book, the one that's out.
All right,
Everything Abridged.
everything abridged, yeah.
I read it. Bravo. And it took me, I feel bad because, you know, I've had it on my shelf for a long time and it took me a long time to read it. And I just want people to know it's not because it wasn't an excellent book. It's because the danger, I think, of collections is you can step away and come back. It's kind of like that, which is good too, because it means you can just be chipping away at it.
Oh yeah, there's sort of that a la carte kind of effect to it, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And someone even told me, I think it might have been Michael Estrin, when I had commented in maybe one of your posts that I had bought the book and I was looking forward to reading it. And Michael's like, oh, it's great. You know, you can just jump in anywhere and like just pick a story. But I'm like, I couldn't do that. I had to read it from start to finish. I don't know. That's just the way my brain works. But plus, it's alphabetical.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, that's like a commitment to the bit, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I kind of wanted to give you the chance to sort of pitch the book, or I'm curious how you did pitch this book or how it came together, because I did know that some of the pieces in there are former pieces that you had published elsewhere. Like I think the
Mhm.
Clark's World pieces in there and maybe some from the New Yorker, possibly, or McSweeney's. I can't remember, but there were a couple in there that you had published in other outlets that ended up in the book. So I'm curious at what point you said to yourself, all right, I'm going to make a whole book out of all this, and how you figured out how to glue it all together.
That's a great question. So one thing is just that the whole Devil's Dictionary thing was an early influence of mine.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it'd be really cool to sort of like do my kind of tribute to that whole mock reference book thing.
Right.
That was definitely an element of it. There are 4 or 5 stories in there, more of the sort of sci-fi spec fic kind of ones that have some shared setting notes. So I was already thinking of like maybe staple gunning them together and how I offered them, and I liked this frame for it, this mixture of these like entries and longer stories and sometimes it is also just context. Like a lot of I did just have some of these free floating stories that I thought that again, like I guess pushed me more in that collection kind of direction. But I would say that like inspiration from A, the Devil's Dictionary thing, and B, I was always a big fan of those John Hodgman books, like the area of my expertise and all those.
Okay. I'm not familiar, but
Oh, so he's like this comedian and he's a lot of fun. His life stuff is great. He does a lot of acting these days. And one of his big hustles is he just puts out these sort of metafictional joke books that are also these mock reference books. And
right.
those definitely left, I guess, their little, I don't know, fingerprints on my brain somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And way back when, and I'm talking like back when before Patreon, the crowdfunding thing. Back when Kickstarter was like a viable thing for human beings. I actually had this idea in undergrad. It was back when he used that blind monkey name a lot more, and was gonna be called like the Blind Monkey Dictionary or something, and it was just like a similar, obviously different stories, but it was like a similar concept. So I guess in a way it is me sort of necroing a concept and doing it with the skill I have, I guess more in the present, or that I hope I have in the present. Maybe that's obviously, you know, a relative or eye of the beholder kind of thing, but I think I've improved. I guess I guess sort of the two like other than the referencing, the sort of two big unifying mental threads in this book are me thinking about politics today and me sort of sorting through this whole like parental passing thing, which are, you know, sort of two very disparate things in a way, but they kind of weave in and out each other throughout the whole thing. And I'm very happy with how it came out. I was particularly happy I got to do that whole paperback edition and get those last 2 things in there. I that is a self-indulgence that is normally reserved for Spotify artists and assorted rappers that have now gone insane. So I'm glad I got to borrow from their playbook in that sense.
So you added more to the book for the paperback copy? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I added 2 things. Well, actually, I added a bunch of entries too, but I also added 2 stories. I know that I don't remember if it was like haiku or sestina or something. There's a funny poetry entry in the new version too, but I also added I am blanking on my own story titles right now, which is very.
That's okay. Because I have the hardcover, so I don't have the new stuff in it. I'll have to get my hands on a copy of that so I can read that.
I think you would like it. For one, as an esteemed Wadi running romance writer, you might appreciate that one of the new stories actually kind of has a rom-comish bent. It's about the sort of aftermath of this one breakup. And the other thing is I guess a little grimmer, more personal, but it's kind of a mock recipe that goes a bit into sort of Jamaican culture stuff, a bit again into the bygone parent thing. I also think it's funny in kind of a more gallows-ish kind of way, though obviously gallows humor informs a lot of what was already in there.
Right. Fantastic. Well, just for everyone who's listening, because one of the cool hooks of the book is the dictionary element, because the whole thing moves in essentially alphabetical order. And
Mhm.
Denard is defining all of these terms, very familiar terms, in sort of satirical ways. And then every once in a while, he'll just drop a story on you. And the lengths of them are all different. So sometimes you'll just get wrapped up into like a story that takes you for a couple pages. And then at one point, you're just in like a novella, like towards the end with Post Atomic Stress, which was fantastic, by the way. And I really liked how much of your work was speculative, because that's a genre that I didn't really play with until I came to Substack, but it's really fun to play in
Mhm.
that space. And I think it blends well with satire, because it's kind of like, here we go. This is what we're walking into, right?
Yeah, it's one of the most natural pairings in the world, I think. Like when you say where are we headed, one of the like intuitive ways a mind might go is like the comedic bent of it.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I kind of feel like you have to do that. Well, we're going to talk about this in a minute, because when we get to talking about satire specifically, I really liked what you had to say about it in your documentary. So we'll touch on that in a few minutes. So just for everyone, I just pulled a couple of the terms from the book that I thought would be fitting for fiction writers and readers, just to give you kind of a taste of how Denard was
Awesome.
working this. So he defines fiction as lawsuit-proof nonfiction, which I love. Publishing is the reason you're more into TV. Again, spot on. Reading is a game people played before radio. And short fiction, an obsolete form best left to graduate school washouts. Touche, right? So it's that kind of thing. And I had to ask you too. I just imagine you have somewhere on your computer or in handwritten notes just like 1,000 words that didn't make it into the final cut. Did you just like write a ton of these and then had to make like some hard decisions about which ones made it in? Or was it pretty easy to streamline it from the beginning?
So I started out writing these. They were basically a set of notebooks that I would just tend to, and I would just fill them out more idly at first before I had any kind of, revision deadlines or anything to do with this. And
Hmm.
there definitely was a mountain of ones that were just taken out back and like put with a nice family farm upstate.
Right.
Like I look at a definition and say, "Oh, that doesn't make sense," or "Oh, that is deeply offensive. I need to maybe reflect on myself."
Soften that a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder too. Now, you went through a small press for this book. Is that right? Overlook Press? Or is that in the big five territory?
So I went through Overlook, which was part of Abrams. I had this wonderful editor, Chelsea Cutchins. She was really helpful throughout this whole process.
Were you agented at the time? Was a question I had, or did you have a literary agent at that time?
Yes, I had the same agent I have now, Reeves Hamilton through Vertical Ink, and are you supposed to throw those names around? I have no idea. Whatever.
I don't know. I was more just curious if, because I'm sitting here with no agent and looking at small presses as like more of a viable option than trying to get an agent. But I was just curious where you were in that line of things when you were pitching this particular book.
Oh, so for me, the sequence, and I was trying to, I guess, focus on one step of the whole thing at a time.
Hmm.
So first, I just like locked in, like, okay, I'm gonna try to get in. I'm going to like, well, first I locked in, like, okay, I'm gonna try to finish these manuscripts, and I was like, okay, so I have some material to try to offer now. Now I'm just gonna try to focus on this whole agenting thing, which I don't even think I really did it in an efficient kind of way. Like I'm a terrible networker. It was a direct querying kind of situation.
Hmm.
And I worked on that for some time and eventually met him, and that was good. And then we were just focused on shopping stuff around. Actually, when met this, all right, hopefully I am not flayed for revealing our secret backstory, but I actually wrote a completely different project when I met him, and that he really enjoyed and said he could do nothing with, but would be interested in what else I had.
Right.
So
I think that's good backstory though, because I've heard that from other people too, that they go in with one book and then that book just can't move. And so then it's on to the next on to the next thing with your agent. No, I think that's valuable information for people who are in this for sure.
I remember it was a super timely satire, so I definitely understand part of the core problem was that it was written in early 2015 in terms of me sort of putting my finger in the wind and saying, I think we're about to plunge down that valley. And we did, and then it was just sort of nonfiction. Then kind of less extreme than what happened,
Right.
which is a weird place for a political satire to be, especially because I tend to go kind of ribald. So I don't know, you don't want to lose your South Park edge to reality, I guess.
Yes, exactly. Which is why, well, it's weird because speculative can seem far off, but at the same time, it's not always that far off, which is the scary part of speculative fiction.
Oh, definitely.
All right, awesome. I feel like I could talk about everything abridged forever, but I have some other things to talk to you about. So I want to talk a little bit just about your other bylines because I would say, and this isn't for everybody because everybody has different goals, like what they want, but I would say getting published in the New Yorker or McSweeney's are two really big ones for a lot of fiction and humor writers, of which I would consider myself both. I've never made like a valiant effort or even remotely an effort. I've submitted like one or two things to McSweeney's, not the internet tendency, but the quarterly
Mhm.
thing, fiction. So if you go on your website, Denard's website, which is seemoreevil.com, correct?
Got it in one.
Yeah. You'll scroll down and then you'll keep scrolling and you'll keep scrolling. Yes, he's got like a ton of bylines. And I just didn't know you had so many. Like, you say, like I said, you can borrow my intro if you want, because I don't think you talk yourself up enough. You've had a lot of work published in those, what I consider like the big guys that everybody wants to get into. So I'm curious to hear from you now, like, how important do you think those credentials have been to your more recent success, like in the last 5 years? Like, obviously, when you read, on Publishers Weekly, they do like the little notices when a book gets picked up, and a lot of times they'll start it with, New Yorker published so and so or whatever. So you have that little piece of bling, so to speak. I'm just curious to hear how much you think that's affected, your trajectory and what your early submission process looked like before you got published in there. How often were you throwing stuff at them and how long were you waiting in between to find out, I'm just, for other people and for me, I'm just curious what your experience with those guys has been like.
Yeah, those are all great questions. Let's see, where should I
There
start?
was a lot of them I threw at you. Sorry. Pick one. It's fine.
All right, so I guess first the impact was
Yeah.
I think the real huge positive of it was that it kind of makes it easier to kind of elevator pitch myself for other stuff. Like when I also like when I got involved with like the hot dog stuff, I could say like I'm this guy, I do yada yada. And I
Right.
think that, even some things that like haven't manifested, but I was like working on like I was trying to do this whole TV pilot thing, and it was just I actually met the guy I was working on because he saw one of those things. And I think another thing is that it kind of and this is obviously the lifetime war, but it kind of was just another pillow I could put over the face of that self-doubt that hovers over
Right.
throughout a lot of this writing stuff. Is just like, okay, I climbed over this kind of little mountain that I've always kind of wondered if I could make it to the other side of. And it makes a big difference for a lot of that kind of stuff. There are other things that I'm sure it probably makes a difference with, but it's hard for me to know because of I'm just sort of living in the first person perspective. So I want to say that, it's probably good for like how the book moves or how easy it is to try to sell this other thing. But I've only really tilted those windmills in the aftermath of that stuff.
Right.
In terms of the submission process, it was pretty different for a lot of these things. Like the McSweeney stuff, which I think I've only actually been in there like twice, but like it was a lot of submitting to get in there over time. Like I was throughout my entire time at the ad agency, I was trying to get in there. I just was never really firing at their wavelength. Even if when I toss stuff there now,
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily lined up of how do I want to do it, which is fair. I think everyone has their tone, what they're looking for, or whatever. But it's interesting because all right, I think the theme of this interview is I just say all the stuff that I probably shouldn't, and I just assume that they don't pay attention to me.
And I'll just add this disclaimer to you. And if there's anything that you remember saying that you don't want published in the interview, just let me know and I'll cut it out. But I actually think this is really valuable stuff. But if you would know better if you're not supposed to say something with regard to any of this. But yeah, I'm not frightened by anything you're saying. I mean, I'm frightened by, the size of it, but
So how you line up with specific editors or random timing or trends, whatever, can just be a random thing because, and this will sound insane. This will probably sound insane, but I've had a way easier time just because she kind of maybe gets me more or something, like doing the New Yorker stuff than the McSweeney stuff. Because I guess it just is just more in her. I don't know. That's unexpected. So I guess like there's a huge luck of the draw thing. I guess my first like breakthrough publishing and still one of my sort of cherished publications was the sci-fi journal Clark's World. And there's a story in Everything Abridged that was from Clark's World, Own Goal.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
That was like, I guess getting that out there and in a magazine I respected so much changed a lot for my just how far I could push things. Like it's easy to say like, keep going and persevere, but it's always hard mentally. And I think like those little moments really did help me keep going. Like I guess there's a sense of tangible progress when that happened.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
yeah, it's incredibly easy to be like, yeah, just keep going, even if nothing is coming back at you to say, yeah, you should be doing this.
Yeah.
So having that thing that's like, yeah, you should be doing this and it's weird that we have to have another, person, or we'll call them gatekeepers because that's what everybody calls them, but that you need that person to tell you that. But I think that's a human condition thing. We absolutely need people to tell us that we're on the right track or that we're not making a mistake by spending all of our time writing made up stories. So yeah, I totally get that.
It is totally a human condition thing. I think that I don't know, I just remember while I was sort of trying to get some of the like before I got some of like the independent online stuff going and like a few of the pranks, etc. Just there was these like 2 long desert feeling periods, like one right after undergrad, and then I sort of got that more independent stuff together. And then even after that, like after grad school for like half a decade, I just felt like I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of this is just feeling like a lot of nothing is happening. And it's a very
there's a term for it. I learned what it is.
What's this term?
It's called languishing.
Languishing.
Yes, and if you look it up, not for like what does languishing mean in the dictionary, but there's like an actual psychological term for it that it's not the same as depression. It's like a separate thing, but it has a lot of like similar, and it happens to people at these transition periods, like when they finish something big, like undergrad or graduate school, or, after you have kids, like it's kind of like this drop in, and it has a lot to do, I think, with expectations and them not being met. You're like, okay, I did this. Now I should be feeling A, B, C, or D about it, but I'm not. And you just kind of like swim in it, and it's very unpleasant because I looked it up, Denard, because I'm experiencing it myself right now. It's like, the midlife. I'm not going to call it a midlife crisis anymore because that's BS. It's just a sticking point.
Recurring life crisis.
Yes, sure. I'm not sure if that sounds better or not. I'd rather there just be one, but there's clearly more than one. That's the thing. People have them in their 20s, and people have them again after they retire, and they're like, okay, now what the hell do I do? Or empty nesters. There's just all these points along the way that you can just kind of be like, now what? But so that's the point, I guess, is you just keep going and you just keep making more stuff and I do think with like editors, and again, I don't have a lot of experience with this, but like it's easy to feel like, oh, this publication hates me, or these people just don't get me. And that's, I don't think the hate part is true, but the not getting you or not connecting with your work might be true. And that's just because you're dealing with a human on the other end of the, you know what I mean? Like, not everyone's work that I read connects with me either, but I'm just not in a position where that matters. But those people are. They're in a position where they're making a decision that could pull somebody out of languishing if they wanted to. But clearly they don't want to. But yeah, so I think that's an important thing for everyone to remember. And again, it's just like they're reminding yourself to persevere. It's like, remember, it's just one person's opinion. It helps, but it
You have
doesn't.
to try to stay sane with this kind of thing. I think it's way too easy to invest 200% of your personal self-worth in what in getting through this particular gate or this particular timeline or vision of
Right.
things getting out there. And that's just not necessarily the healthiest point or perspective. I feel like I left one of those questions you had in the sort of combo question out. I'm not sure which one.
I was satisfied with the discussion we had about that. I was just, kind of curious because I do think, I know of a lot of writers that I hang with on Substack and stuff who like would just, their world would just be complete if they got in McSweeney's, or you know what I mean? And I guess I don't have that same need to be in those things, but I do see it as a stepping stone that it would be cool to have stepped on. So I either need to just get my shit together and start submitting there, or just find something similar that I can step on. Because there are other things, but it's hard. It doesn't feel like a monopoly, but it's kind of like you hear the same 2-3 publications circling around as being the ones. And now it's hard to, for those of us who are kind of trying to figure this out, there's a lot of little guys out there, little, literary magazines who are all struggling. But sometimes I read their submission guidelines and I'm like, these are just people that are taking themselves too seriously and they just want their friends in their magazine. Like, you can just hear it in the in the verbiage. It's like, I don't know. I think everyone just wants to find their niche, and we're all trying to like get in other people's niches, and it's I'm not sure it's possible.
It is this whole weird feudal landscape, like trying to find someone like, are you looking for a vassal, my lord?
I don't know.
These are my wares.
Well, this is why I think Substack has been good for a lot of people, because you can make your own. It's like a DIY niche. You're like, here's my stuff. You can come see it now. But the problem I think we're having now is it's not enough to have, in terms of like when you're looking for agents, you can't be like, hey, I got this really popular Substack and all these people who are reading it. They're like, we don't care. Have you been in the New Yorker? Have you been in McSweeney's?
Right.
Do you have an MFA? Okay, so let's skip to that now. So I want to keep this part brief because, again, this doesn't come up as much anymore, but when I was first starting out trying to write pseudo professionally, I guess, was, is the MFA something I need or something anyone needs? And I know for a fact people get published all the time that don't have them. So, and it's, again, it's hard. This was one of my frustrations in a previous episode about sort of the predatory nature of, I don't think universities are becoming predators. Like, come take our program and get an MFA.
It's fair to call a lot of universities pretty predatory. Like they have kind of a hawkish, lioness expression to them. You see some of these tuition rates, and it's like, yeah.
Well, there's that piece too. So, like, for some people, and I'm thinking more about, because I'm the age that I am. I'm in my 40s. I don't have the money to go back to school, so like it's kind of already off the table for me. But I do sometimes lament the fact that I didn't go to school for writing and I didn't continue to go to school for writing. So I guess my question for you is, the first way I wrote this question was worth it? Question mark. But I'm going to change that and ask you, if you could go back, given the time that you spent in grad school and what you took away from it, would you do it again?
Okay, so I have gotten a few MFA questions over time, and I think I finally have the exact words for how useful I think it is.
Okay.
I think it is an incredibly useful thing that is thoroughly overpriced and not worth. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like it is like a really it's like a fast car, or like to anybody that has either like a scholarship or a lot of disposable income or a gambling personality, I would totally recommend it. But if you're looking for proportionate ROI or odds or anything like that, that's just not there.
Yeah.
It is So it is like it's like a luxury object essentially. Like it's helpful, but
Yeah.
it's not mandatory and it's not going to be proportionate to the expense essentially.
Gotcha. No, that makes total sense. Yeah, because I can't imagine you're not learning something. Although you made, what did you say on your on your website that you spoke a lot but learned very little when you were
That
in grad school?
that
I
is a
think that's
thing.
on your
Yeah.
website.
Yeah, that is definitely one of my bios. And I think that there is a truth that okay, so one great thing about it about like a sort of MFAs is like or just moving to an island for a while is just it is time exclusively dedicated to writing with
Hmm.
that as the mission statement surrounded by other people doing the same thing and that is very very valuable. I and that has introduced me to like some people who are still cheer each other on and all that today. At the same time, they almost every and maybe this is just me looking at the New York Times, but like almost every MFA sort of asked for enough in blood and treasure where I kind of would question it on its. I think the luxury car metaphor is sort of really sticking with me because it really is
Yeah.
that
Well,
kind of
you could
thing.
say that about undergrad education now too. It's insane how much it costs to go to school.
Yeah, yeah, that is a grim drift.
Yeah, I want my kids to just be plumbers and electricians. I already decided. I'm like, I don't know
Be
how.
careful about saying that too loud, or the trade schools are gonna get in on that, and
They're going to start charging too much money. I know, you're
yeah.
right. Well, no, I'm not going to say no one's listening to my podcast, but I'm guessing a lot of plumbers and electricians don't have it on while they're working. But I'm judging. Maybe they do. Maybe they're curious to hear what I have to say. So thank you for sharing that. And it wasn't my goal to have you be like, don't get a degree or don't go to graduate school. But I think it is for some people, they see it as something they need to move forward. And I mean, I feel like you can get not the same education, but like what you described as being everybody's in a place working on the same thing. I mean, you could say that Substack is sort of a form of that for people because I think a lot of people go there, fiction writers in particular. I'm coming from that community where they're like, oh, we're all here and we're all doing the same thing and we're all sort of like cheering each other
Yeah.
on, like you said. And I think you can find that in other spaces that are less expensive or free if you are good at looking for them.
I would agree with that. Like if you are on like a pure, I don't know, 8 Mile kind of mentality, I could definitely still like recommend it. But I think that a lot of successful writing is kind of playing the margins of sustaining your effort, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And it might not be the right move for everyone in terms of like keeping just life sustainable so you can keep writing. I think you need to be
Right.
solvent and alive to write. I have not figured out how to write from the great beyond or
Right. You need to still be walking around
yeah.
and experiencing stuff for sure. All right, excellent. Well, thank you for diving into that a little bit with me. So, since are you like short on time? It's like,
Oh, I'm good on time.
okay. So, because I want to talk about satire specifically. So, in your documentary, which is titled See More Evil as well,
Mhm.
you introduce yourself at the beginning and you say, I'm a writer and on a good day, I'm a satirist. So, I would argue that you're always a satirist. I mean, I feel like it's a strange thing because I've been told that I write satire, and came up with this funny thing in my head the other day that was like, because I consider myself a fiction writer first, but it was kind of like the square rhombus comparison, like,
Oh, yeah.
because what is it? Like all squares are rhombuses, but not all rhombuses are squares. But you could say all satire is fiction, right?
Hmm.
But not all fiction is satire. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what satire is for you, because I know sort of what it is for me when I accidentally do it. So I'm just curious for you to, because you talked about it really quite well in the documentary. I have a couple of quotes here, like, you kind of compared it to like a way to cope with things and making reality more tolerable. So maybe you could like sort of speak to that, like what led you into that arena, or was it just born in you, which is honestly what I think it probably was for me too.
Let's see. So in the future for my self-esteem, I'm going to say that it was born for me, but for our secret audience here, I will say that I was really strongly influenced early on by like Joseph Heller, Terry Pratchett, Matt Groening, Like a lot of those comics of satire, I think left a really early imprint on me.
Hmm.
If I were to like quickly define satire in the sort of Supreme Court sense, like back when we had like a functional one that could like say something like the old pornography quote and we would be amused by it instead of thinking, okay, but which civil right are you taking away from us next?
Right.
But when it comes to like defining satire, I always in terms of a shortcut, I always sort of think of the when you just hear the summary of Lysistrata of like there is a sex strike until this war comes to an end, and it kind of shows you like okay, satire is refracting reality and all of its grim aspects in this specific way that can bring levity to it, or at least just show you directly how insane these things are.
Right.
And I think that it has a lot of unique powers in my view, at least in terms of keeping people grounded and sane as the sort of gyre widens in a lot of situations, or even just being able to focus in on things that are often just not impossible to like you can talk about things normally, but it'll just feel like you're reading aloud from like a casualty report. Whereas like satire is almost like intellectual sugar around a pill in a way. Like there are these aspects of, personal life or politics or love or whatever your personal bugbears are that satire just makes it way more possible to just confront. And I don't even just mean in like some kind of like watering down or make it easy kind of way. Sometimes satire can really crank up the pain of it, but I think it can make it very comprehensible to people
Hmm.
in a lot of it's a wonderful framing tool in my mind.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, you kind of described it a little bit in the, and I'm paraphrasing here a little bit in the documentary, that when there's something that's like really hard to consume or to look at, even, it just sort of puts a spin on it that makes you able to like accept that it's there without shutting down. I mean, there's just some really unpleasant things happening in the world, or just some infuriating things. Like that's where I feel like a lot of my satirical stuff comes from, is just an anger towards something. And I don't necessarily want to feel anger towards things. And so if I can make them funny, it's easier for me to communicate them. And I hope it's also easier for people to like laugh at them. It's kind of like almost like turning your villain into a clown, sort of like you're twisting it so that the thing that's putting you down is suddenly a joke for you.
Yeah, yeah, like
Or like, sort of like making fun of your bully, not to his face because they'll kick the shit out of you, but you know what I mean? In your quiet Substack that no one
I
reads.
agree. It's like a caricature of your personal prison warden can make the sentence way more possible to get through.
There you go. That's also good. Do you remember? I have it written down here in case you don't, but do you remember how you defined satire in your book?
How I defined satire in my book. I don't remember a specific line. What did I put down there?
You put down a compromise between comedy and terrorism.
That's one of my moral flaws, by the way. I'm a classic self-joke laugher.
No, that's good. I thought it was perfect. I wrote brilliant next to it because it's like, it's a way to rage against the machine without getting in trouble for it. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you're not hitting things with baseball bats. You're taking the,
Yeah,
I guess you could call it the high road, but I mean, it is a
at
higher
least at
road.
least the middle road. Like instead of breaking
Sure.
windows, I'm writing funny things on them. And I think that yeah.
Exactly. Which is a delicious segue into your pranks, which I kind of just wanted to touch on briefly. And it's funny because in the back of your book on the jacket copy, it uses the phrase satirical performance art
Oh yeah, yeah. They, they
instead
they
of
definitely
pranks.
put a tie. They didn't put a tie on that for that one. Yeah, I've been having fun with these, and since I want to say this started around 2014 or 15, I think I know the one that blew up originally were these fake MTA signs, which that's the Metropolitan Transit Authority over here in New York,
Yes.
which is just the trains and buses and the like that are always for people home. Imploding. They should be imploding more colorfully now that the whole congestion, whatever thing has died, and along with 20 years of planning, which, you can always find a few billion dollars, a few decades of time under the couch somewhere. But I had these edited versions of the assorted notices they would put up, and I would just replace the text on all these and some of the graphics. And I woke up after I'd just gone around putting a bunch of fake signs, like mostly around southern Brooklyn, mid Manhattan, and I woke up to a lot of text, and I did not know how many journalists were operating off of Facebook requests. It makes me really worried about the quality of a lot of information to see how many of them are
Right.
operating off of Facebook requests, but I had a lot of those. And I was actually really gun shy at first. Like I actually dodged one or two interviews I probably shouldn't have, but I eventually leaned in there. And but yeah, these are mostly honestly the pranks are more for me and my state of mind. I think that I know that there's an approach to this kind of thing where I don't know, I could make it a bit more of a self-promotion kind of effort than I do, but I think that creatively it's good to have some things that are kind of just for you, and I kind of just keep the pranks to things that entertain me and when I want to do them, have the time to do them. And I think that I've always been a fan of like a lot of these sort of signal hijacking kind of jokes. Like here's actually the origin of the kind of fake sign thing I do a lot. I think I've only talked about this in like some print thing way back when, but a lot of comic book fans were a big fan of this stuff called strip slang, right? And that would be when you would take a lot of the text in like comic books, whether it's event comics or like these old vintage comics, and you would just swap that stuff out and put in jokes. And a lot of the pranks I do, I mean, I sort of blossomed out from here, but like how it started out was like basically doing that to a lot of like government notices and responses.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of fun with that. And I guess that's almost like professional strip slang. So that's a fun origin story. I guess there's a big part of it is also I did spend that minute in ads, so I kind of will always, well, I mean, I'm sure I'll lose the superpower eventually, but I can still channel communication newspeak.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was going to say, so in the documentary, I really hope people will watch it because I thought it was really cool. And just to sort of watch you in action, putting this stuff up in that one, the mayoral, the letters from what campaign was it? The mayoral campaign 2021.
Mhm.
You had like these fake letters of resignation from, and you're posting them in ways that people are used to seeing. And it's kind of like assuming that someone's going to take a closer look, but not knowing if they will. So that piece of it is fascinating to me too, because I do think it's like a really creative way to market yourself. Because I know your website is on all of this stuff. Like you have a way. If people are like, okay, what the hell is this? Like, go find out who put this here. And then you also had these stickers you were putting around that I think was your commentary, and that's kind of how I wrote it down. It's like it was almost like a combination performance, commentary, and like guerrilla marketing in this one little sticker where I think you were commenting on climate change.
Oh, yeah, I remember those. The
Tips for
post-apocalypse.
surviving.
Yeah, yeah.
Tip for surviving the apocalypse. And it was like, tip number whatever. I think the one I remember was like, what was it? Don't hang out in groups because the raiders shoot them first or something like that. But it was like,
Those were
I just thought it was
those
brilliant.
were great fun. In terms of the visuals on those, a shout out to Jake Lane. He is the artist that drew the 6 sketches that sort of anchor those.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the climate survival tips was I think I was looking at like some e-cards or something like that, and there's something that kind of whirs in your brain when there are these formats that we're very used to seeing,
Yeah.
and you could change one thing and end up with something completely alien. So I thought it'd be fun to take like, I don't know, you have all these like little hazard signs or like these little sort of some e-cards kind of things, and I like had fun just taking these Mad Max-ish figures and being like, remember, a little bit of camo goes a long way. And that wasn't the line, but
Right.
that's
Exactly.
like that kind of joke.
And then you had there was other one that was featured in there was during the pandemic with all the social distancing
Yeah,
things that you'd find on the floor. And you had one down there and it was something like, the shot is free, unlike a coffin.
that was one of them.
Yeah.
Fun fact about those, I did not know this until I got some very creative email, but that thing went like semi-viral in like conspiracy theory circles
Mm-hmm.
because they're like, this is a CIA psyop. They're trying to mock us to our faces.
Right.
And when I saw that, I thought, wait, was I supposed to be getting paid by the CIA this whole time? Because I am missing a lot of checks. Like where is my social security? I should have like government employee benefits if this is what's going on.
Well, that was one of my questions about the pranks because I'm guessing I'm not even going to bring up this reference because it's stupid. It was just this was a sitcom, New Girl that I watched obsessively for a while. And one of the guys in it has this one episode where he's pranking his roommate And at the end, you find out he spent like $3,500 just to prank his roommate. And so I wonder about how you fund this stuff, because the stuff you're coming out with is like quality stuff. And like another one I'll reference, which is one of the first ones I knew about just because it's when I started reading your work, was the cult posters.
That was a good time.
Which are beautiful and probably very expensive to print out and put all over the city. So do you have like, I don't know, like a side cash that you're like, all right, I'm setting this money aside this month for pranks? Or is it just fun enough that it's sort of like a guilty pleasure for you that you're willing to just spend your money on it to bring this stuff out in the world?
That's pretty much exactly it. Like, I just really enjoy it the way that you might like an expensive hobby or like save for a vacation or whatnot. So I can't lie, I just blow money on it.
Yeah. No, that's it's great because again, it's the staying sane piece. It's like you gotta have entertainment while you're entertaining. And then the last question I had about just your seeming ability to keep like 90 plates spinning at once is like, when do you sleep? But you've made jokes about this that you don't really, or that you're up at 3 a.m. doing most of this stuff.
So I definitely, okay, I'm getting a little better about like sleeping consistently, which is probably good for my long-term survival.
Yes, I would say so.
I think one thing that helps is that a lot of the stuff, there's some maybe variation of what subnook it is, and I think people have different experiences of this, but I definitely feel like I'm engaging a different part of my brain when I'm like, say, doing like a nonfiction like breakdown of some crazy thing for the hot dog thing versus like trying to stitch together a plot versus like trying to just come up with lines for this prank. Like, I feel I can kind of lean into my mood or environment at a given moment a bit. Like, if it's not like directly on the deadline gun, in which case, you just sort of have to ram your head against whatever's in front of you. But whenever things are a little looser, I can kind of guide my effort based on like what's feeling sort of stronger at the moment.
Yes.
And that makes a big difference for me in terms of getting these done.
Yeah. Well, I found that too, because I generally have a lot of things that I'm working on at once and I tend to get overwhelmed. And then I have, children, and that's a whole nother couple of plates that you're always spinning. But yeah, I find because I don't have a lot of people, well, that's not true. People are counting on me in a general sense, but like I always am more efficient when I'm working on the thing that I feel like working on rather than the thing I feel like I have to work on. And I think that's a weird luxury, I guess I can say I have, as someone who's not traditionally published and doesn't have an editor that's waiting on something and doesn't, have all these specific deadlines. So all of you who are listening who have none of those things, let's all celebrate the fact that we can do whatever the hell we want with our with our work time. And there's, an argument to be said that like the best time to make anything is when you feel inspired to make it. So, because I think sometimes people can tell when something's been forced or you've pushed it, where you didn't want to. So I'm going to just ask one last question of you, Denard, and then I'm going to let you go, because I thoroughly enjoyed your first book and I'm very much looking forward to your second one. And I'm wondering if, because all authors are expected to be able to do this on the spot anytime, can you give us an elevator pitch for your upcoming novel that's coming out next year?
Absolutely. So, How to Dodge a Cannonball, July 2025 through Holt, is about a teenager that jumps sides during the U.S. Civil War multiple times.
That's all I needed to hear. That's amazing. And it just conjured up an episode of The Three Stooges, which I know is wonderful and horrible at the same time. But there's one where they do that, or two of them go to one side and one goes to the other by mistake. And then they're trying to like, hide each other from, oh my gosh, it's just ridiculous. But that sounds fantastic. And I'm very much looking forward to it. So yay. I think that's it for us. I think we did a good job. Just over an hour.
I think that was a great conversation, and thank you. Those are great questions, by the way. I really appreciate it.
Good, absolutely. And I'll let you know when this is going to come out, so you can pay attention and listen and share it with your audience, I hope.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Oh, I'm going to put a whole bullhorn on. It's like, somebody cared that I'm alive, everyone.
Isn't that the best? That's definitely at least half of the reason I do this, is so that other people know that I'm paying attention. So cheers, Denard. I'm going to let you go. Have a great day. Is the weather as nice in New York today as it is here?
It is really picturesque out there.
I don't care if you believe me.
Thanks so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, please let me know by hitting the like button, leaving a comment, rating, or review, depending on where you're listening, or by sharing this podcast with your favorite people. Stock Fiction is a dynamic anthology of short fiction, essays, poetry, humor, and multimedia experiments written and produced by me, Meg Olders. If you're into the stuff I'm making, or you're just into supporting the dynamic individual who makes it, I hope you'll consider becoming a free or paid subscriber today. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.